Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the Muslim Storytellers Podcast, where we're passionate about empowering Muslim writers to bring their stories to life. I'm Adisa, content coordinator for the Muslim Storytellers team, so inshallah you'll be hearing my voice on the mic quite a bit. You can expect some great conversations about the craft of writing, marketing and publishing, interviews, reviews, and so much more, inshallah. To kick things off for this podcast, inshallah, today's episode is all about what it means to be a writer. I think there's no better way to start than with the existential questions that writers ask themselves. What makes a writer? When can one be considered a writer? And what makes writing a meaningful pursuit? Every writer has their own personal motivations and unique relationship with writing, whether they see it as a hobby, a calling, or a way to pay the bills. The art of writing is fascinating. It starts out as such an intimate expression of self, yet others can read and resonate and connect deeply with another person's words, thoughts, and imagination. Sharing writing with the world is a courageous act, and indeed one that is very important, particularly for us Muslims who aim to share meaningful stories with the world. But the act of going public and becoming a published author, making money from your work, is a privilege and a journey that's not always straightforward. In some ways, this question will pop up again and again throughout various episodes of the podcast, but today, my guest, Suad Kamardeen, helped us pick apart some of her reflections based on her own journey as a writer. Suad is a woman who wears many hats, mashallah. She's a British Nigerian Muslim writer, editor, and photographer with a first class engineering degree and a creative writing master's from Oxford. She's the founding editor of Waif Journal, winner of the SI Leeds Literary Prize 2022 for her YA novel Never Enough, and she runs the Qalb Writers Collective for Muslim women in the literary community. Her work explores themes of friendship, family, belonging, identity, joy, and love, with a commitment to telling the stories of Black and Muslim women. I think you'll really enjoy this interview, so let's jump right in. I am happy to be joined by Suad Kamardeen. Would you like to introduce yourself, Suad, and a little bit about your relationship with writing and your background with writing?
So I'm Saad. I'm a writer and an editor and a mentor and also founder of Qalb Writers Collective, which is basically like a literary home for Muslim women writers. I do have a day job as a publishing operations editor, which is for Emerald Publishing, which is an academic publishing space. My relationship with writing, oh God, I feel like I've written for all of my life. There have been lots of gaps though in between, to be honest. So growing up, I was one of those kids who would sit in the corner by themselves and was probably daydreaming or crafting stories in their heads. And I remember buying all these notebooks just to write my own stories. And from a very young age, I was certain I was going to be a published author. I just said to myself that I want to be an author, but I never thought about it as like a career path. I just thought I'm going to write stories that's going to be published because I read stories, I enjoy them, and I always want to tell my own stories.
Mm.
Um, but for those who don't know, I was born in Nigeria and I went to school in Nigeria until I was 14. And you know the way that secondary school work in Nigeria, well, senior secondary school, you're either in like science class or art class or commercial. But anyways, when it came down to going to what class you're going to be in, I was very good at maths and sciences. And sciences was usually seen as the more lucrative field at the time, right? So a lot of my teachers were suggesting doing sciences, but also to be fair, I love maths so much and chemistry. And so it was natural that I was going to go to science class, but I didn't think that was going to stop me from writing. But I did actually eventually stop thinking about writing, but I was still reading. And then moving to the UK, I would still write stories, but not in a way that I would share with other people. And then life happened, right? Being a teenager happened, thinking about career paths happened. And I think my entire mindset changed when I moved to the UK because it became, oh, you're a child of immigrants and you need to focus on like creating a future that's beneficial and one that rewards your parents for the sacrifices that they made and all of those different things. And writing is not one of those things that you think about when you're thinking about a career that rewards your parents. And
Mm.
so I ended up doing a bachelor's in chemical engineering. And all of this time, writing is like on and off, but I wasn't actually actively thinking about it. But I had a game plan. I was like, I started doing chemical engineering because I liked chemistry and maths. But after my first year, or even in the middle of my first year, I realized that I did not like this degree. And for some reason, it didn't occur to me that I could just do something else. So I just said, you know what, I'm going to finish my degree. I'm going to get a master's in chemical engineering. I'm going to work as a chemical engineer for 5 years. and I'm gonna save up enough money to allow me to quit my job and then maybe go work as a teacher and then find my way into. I wasn't even thinking about writing, just teaching because I loved teaching. I still love teaching.
Mm.
Um, but then in my second year, it got worse. Like I was trying so hard to love the degree. I was spending a lot of time in the library, but it wasn't working out. So I decided I was going to um do a 1 year placement. And even though the 1 year placement was to get work experience, my actual goal for that placement, I remember telling to one of my friends, was to find out what I really want to do. The long story short, this was 2016. And I start my placement in June 2016. And I normally do like a reflections of the year. And I was going through my goals and I realized I'd set a goal in January 2016 to write a book. I don't know why I set the goal. I don't know when I set the goal. All I know is I saw in my journal that I'd said in 2016 I'm going to write a book. I didn't know what
Wow.
the book was about. And so because I was on placement and our time was like 7 a.m. to 3:30 because my placement was at BMW and they would make us work around the same time that they would produce the cards. So I was like, you know what, you have time. Like you don't have deadlines. You're just going to work and coming back home. And I will never forget this because I still have the book at home. I walked to Paper Chase and I bought this book and I started writing this novel that I'm still
Wow.
working on 9 years later, guys, but doesn't matter.
So
Started writing
what?
this novel
Yeah.
and I wrote the first chapter and I was like, this is crap. This is not how writing works. But
Mhm.
one of the things I love about myself is when I see something that I see everything as a challenge. And I believe that writing is something that can be learned. It's like really good writing. You can learn how to write well.
Yeah.
And so I said to myself, don't think about it too much, just write and then just start learning everything you can learn about writing. So I started nerding out. I joined lots of communities online. I was reading blog posts. I bought books. I joined online courses just because I wanted to be good enough that I wasn't cringing at my own work. But in this 1 year of doing all of that work of writing the book, I started in June and I remember finishing in November. And parts of what helped me, to be honest, was I remember like when I started this goal, one of my friends, a lot works in the best ways. One of my friends just messaged me randomly saying, "Oh, you know Layin Kasani." So before she became the transformative coach, she used to do writing coaching. So she would
Okay.
like set up a group, maybe like five of us, four of us, and it'd be like an 8 week thing where she would coach you to write your book. But it's not for the craft, it's more for the mindset building and the goal setting. So I said, you know, I really want to commit time to this book. So I joined the course. It was paid, but I was like, you know what? If there's one thing I love doing, it's investing in myself. So I just like, I'm gonna pay for this thing. And I think it ran for 8 weeks, and she would get us to set goals every week and would say what we're trying to work on, what we're stuck in, and all of those things. And I think all of that contributed to the building of the mindset. One of the first things
Really.
that she made us do, which I kept on doing, was you had to write a commitment letter to yourself about the project, about your writing, and like you tied it to Allah. And I think that was one of the best things about it. It was always like Allah centered first and foremost. So like I'm committing to do this for the sake of Allah for these reasons. This is why this is important to me and why I have to finish this. And I think I'd set myself a deadline for when I wanted to finish. And I think once I'd finished the draft of the book in November, it made me realize that anything is possible. Even though it was not the best book in the world, I think
Yeah.
just that kind of changed the shape of everything for me. And I remember that once I was in that space, I started thinking about what I actually wanted to do. And I
Mm.
thought, you know what, I love psychology, I love writing, but I love psychology and writing for the same reasons. It's just people. I'm so interested in people. I want to know why people do what they do, why they act in the way that they act. And a lot of the times, whenever I'm starting a story or novel, it always comes with an idea and a character, and I'm trying to write to see why they're doing what they're doing, why they've gotten to the point that they've gotten to, how they're going to get themselves out of it or not out of it, and why they want, and all of those different questions. So I remember applying for a master's in creative writing and a master's in psychology in that year. I went on to my degree. I messaged my degree program person to say I'm no longer doing the master's. I was on the master's course, the 4 year. So I switched from that to 3 years bachelor's. And I remember there was a big conversation with my parents
Oh
because I
wow.
just told my dad I'm not doing the 4 year master's anymore. And he's like, why? And I was like, I'm trying to love Kemenj, but it's not it. It's not giving me the thing that I want from it. And I love learning. So the moment I feel like I'm not enjoying something that I love doing anymore, especially learning. I mean, I'm a nerd. It's just a sign. It's a sign for me that I need to change course. I need to find my path. And you know what's so funny? In that year, 2017, I applied for the masters at Oxford, and I got in that year. But one promise I'd made to myself, because I'd also started learning about the dean more when I was at uni, I promised myself that I wasn't going to do anything to do with a student loan, anything that had to do with interest. And if I could go back, I could. I wished at the time I knew more about like apprenticeship and other ways to go to uni for
Yeah.
undergrad. I mean, I know that there are people who say you can do your first degree with the loan, but I said for anything that's like postgraduate, that's not a necessity. I didn't want to take out loan, and I tried to find funding. I couldn't find funding, and I ended up turning down the course, right? But that writing that book kind of changed how I saw my writing. So even though I didn't end up going into the course, I still continued working on my writing. I finished the novel, I put it aside because I knew that I needed to edit it to get to where I wanted it to be. But
Mm-hmm.
that novel was too close to home, and the entire writing experience was painful. So I struggled to like go back to the novel. And a lot again ordains everything in the best of ways. The funny thing is, I remember thinking when I finished that novel, I'm never gonna have another novel idea again. I'm never gonna be able to write again, and I was stressing out. But I was still like trying to learn how to write short stories. But then I remember like in May 2017, I woke up from a very vivid dream and it became the idea for the next novel I was working on. And that novel is dead and gone right now. But I worked on it for 6 years and I wrote like 7 drafts. And even though that novel is dead and gone, that's the novel that got me into Oxford both times. And I solely, like, firmly believe that that novel was a novel Allah wanted to use to teach me to write. Because even though I've said it's dead and gone, I do believe it's dead and gone. Majority of all of the things that I learned about writing, I learned through writing that novel. Wrote two people's perspective in first person, in third person, in past tense, in present tense. There's a lot of learning,
Wow,
God,
subhanAllah.
in that novel. But like it never deterred me from doing the work and it's a very long story, but it's just my writing just became shaped from the experience of like I can write a novel, I've done it, it's not impossible, and I can continue to learn and improve and work towards this thing. And I just feel like writing is something that Allah's blessed me with. It's the
Alhamdulillah.
art of storytelling. And I really firmly, strongly believe I'd be doing myself a disservice if I wasn't writing. And I also get like physical anxiety when I've not been writing for a long time. Like, even if it's not something I'm going to share, it's just if I'm not writing, I can
Oh
feel
yeah.
jittery,
Yeah, I
feel lots of
actually
things in my
I
body.
relate to that quite a bit. I think I read something that said that when you're a creative, that all that bottled up creative energy, if it's not
Hmm.
used in the way that, you're meant to use it, whether that's writing or however Allah has designed you to release that, then it kind of turns itself into something else and the energy changes into anxious energy or,
Mm,
jitters or whatever it
I
is. And I thought that
agree.
was
I
very interesting because
agree.
I've experienced that personally. But subhanAllah, like your trajectory and your story is so interesting. So, you go from writing for the love of it from day one to having these considerations of money and, making a career for yourself that is lucrative and, still holding on to that dream of being a published author. But, life, subhanAllah, comes with its own challenges.
Hmm.
You've
Hmm.
spoken about learning the craft and investing in the craft and really trying to dedicate yourself and committing. I really love that idea of a commitment letter, committing yourself to really becoming the best at whatever it is that you do. The courage to talk to your parents as well is a huge thing and really express, that your true desire, and your real passion for writing, sticking to your principles of taking a loan. I think that's so beautiful how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also, developing you throughout this process. And you mentioned how
Hmm.
you're getting close to your dean.
But to be fair, like Allah paid me back is like transactional, but Allah did pay me back because when I got into the masters again in 2022, I got this funding from this Muslim organization because it's a 2-year masters, and I
Mm,
got the funding to cover the 2 years of the course. And the year after I got the funding closed. Like they weren't doing it anymore. And I just kept
subhanallah.
thinking about how Allah just aligned everything perfectly for me to get the funding at the time that I needed to get that funding because my writing had grown so much. But also, when I started the masters in 2022, I realized that I would not have benefited from it in the same way that I did now if I had done the masters in 2018. Like I
Mm,
wouldn't have been ready for it. And I feel like a lot of the struggles I faced on my masters would have pushed me away from the masters as opposed to actually help me grow during the masters. But yeah, alhamdulillah. Just lots of
mm.
good came out of that decision. Um,
That's really beautiful. And yeah, very true that Allah always pays us back, so to speak, when it comes to making sacrifices for His sake. I just find it so beautiful that, that identity and that commitment to writing deep down was always still there. What would you say in terms of your personal idea of being a writer is, and how it's changed from when you were writing just for the love of it to when you considered, investing in the craft to, going through drafting these novels that haven't seen the light of day yet, but still really appreciating the process. What does that say to you about, the process of writing and being a writer?
Oof. I think maybe for me, because I think about like when I was writing as a young child, a lot of the times I was writing for not necessarily to escape, but to understand. So I remember growing up, right, my mom was very strict. So a lot of my stories will be about a child who comes from a strict household and how they
Mm.
grow up to overcome it. But also like some of the things that I watched and saw happen to other people, I would explore it through storytelling to understand why. And I think that that's still there. Like writing is still for me first and foremost a means of understanding my emotions, but also understanding people, understanding things. I remember that there was a time where like whenever something happens to me and I can't seem to get the answer that I want, I'll just write a story about it. I won't share with anyone, but I'll write the story about it because then it allows them to control the narrative and then I can change the ending to what I would have wanted to happen. Um, and I think it was that kind of power that writing gave me that I really liked as
Mm.
well, especially when you're young and you feel powerless and no one's listening to me. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I
Um,
love about writing, even as an adult, right? Like a lot of the times when we tell stories, we're giving voice to something or someone.
yeah.
And I think that that's the thing that's remained cool to my writing. But I think the thing that's also shifted is as a child, I'm not thinking, oh, it's my God-given talents and what can I use this, how can I use this gift to serve Allah? Whereas like in learning about Allah and developing a relationship with Allah, like I know that writing, even though it's for me, it can't be for me alone. Like it has to be a way that act as a vicegerent or khalifa on earth.
Mm.
And I think about how I can use it. And it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm telling other people's story. It might just be that from my act of honoring that gift that Allah has given me, I can empower someone else to honor that gift that Allah has given them too. But just like thinking about Allah and just thinking about my relationship with Allah and how I want to serve Allah kind of changed the way that I think about writing. And I remember like I had a mentor in 2022. She wasn't a writer, but she was a creative. And she was trying to help me think more about my writing and how to frame it. And she'd given me like a phrase to think about. Um, and the phrase was something like, I write to live and I live to write. And I remember for a while I used to think, oh, yeah, that's a good phrase. And I'd wrote it in my book. But I
Mhm.
think last year or 2 years ago, when I was redefining like what writing meant to me, and I don't know, I mean, I guess having gone to Umrah twice, I feel like those moments were pivotal just in my life in general. I started to rethink that phrase and it didn't sit well with me anymore that I was saying that I live to write and I write to live because I live to serve Allah and
Mhm.
everything else is a means.
Yeah.
And I had to come to terms with a lot of things. I had to come to terms with the fact, I mean, I'm praying I become a published author, but I had to come to terms with the fact that even if I don't become a published author,
It's not your
that's
life.
okay.
Yeah, subhanallah.
Like Allah has created a pathway, Allah has designed my life, and Allah loves me. And I believe that with all of my heart. And I put my best into my writing and everything else. But not being published or being published is not the be all end all.
Yeah.
Writing is not the be all end all. Writing is a great means for me to connect to Allah, but if Allah takes it away from me, I pray He doesn't. Like, that should not impact my relationship with Him. I mean, this is going to
Mm.
be a test, a big test. It's going to shape. But the thing is, whenever Allah tests us in big ways, the end goal is always good, right? It's always very fruitful in the end. But I just had to reframe that relationship in my mind and just really think you're not really writing to live because like Allah's the one that gives you the words, and Allah, like without Allah, you can't write a word. So it was very good. It's just been very good for me to just rethink and just reinvestigate for myself over and over again why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes with writing as well, because you're trying to get published, it's so easy to get caught up in everything that's not happening. But the moment you go from writing to wanting to be published, there's a million and one things that's not in your control. And that's when
Mm.
you really need to trust Allah. Like you need to do the best that you can. You need to explore all of the resources Allah's put at your disposal, but you also need to trust in Allah's timing, in Allah's plan, and know what you're writing for and what you're seeking to
Mm.
be published for as well. That's been like
Yeah.
my thought process with writing so far.
So a better transformation of that motto that you were told is more like writing for Allah, living for Allah. Um,
Mm-hmm.
that's very interesting and it's so beautiful. The most the best self development is that self development through the deen. And it's so beautiful that Allah took that passion and talent and, that became a part of your journey towards Allah. Because I do know that sometimes people struggle with things that they are interested in, talented at, and really
Mhm.
integrating that into their purpose of worshiping Allah. But alhamdulillah, it's always beautiful when Allah makes that path. The last question that I'll ask now is, you've gone through these various phases of your time to write, relationship with writing,
Mhm.
different aspects come in when you want to be published as well. So with all of different life responsibilities and, the demands of study and work and life, when do you make the time to write and why do you prioritize it?
I'm just laughing because I'm always asking myself, when do you make time to write? Gotta make time to write. I just make the time. And to be fair, I'm very intentional about like goal setting. I'm of the belief that if something is important enough to you, if you care about something enough, you're gonna show up for it.
Hmm.
There's some times where I can like show up for my writing a couple times a week, and there's sometimes I just don't have the capacity. So like one thing I've learned to do is think about the state I'm in. If I'm emotionally exhausted, I can't write even if I've put 2 hours on the calendar to write. Um, and I think one of the things I do is I try to revisit my intention as frequently as possible. Why am I writing? What's important to me about writing? And how can I create a life that allows me to write? One thing I made clear to myself before I went into full-time work was writing is important to me. Because it's important to me, I have to find time to write, even if I'm working full-time.
Hmm.
And so I have to look at the shape of my calendar and think about when would be a good time for me to write. Sometimes it's in the evenings, sometimes it's in the morning. And I think one of the things I had to learn the hard way was something that worked last year might not work this year. So before the pandemic hit, when I was crazy, busiest time of my life, when I was living in Berlin, I was working part-time, I was studying full-time, and somehow I was writing every single day for 2 hours. 7
Subhanallah.
a.m. to 9 a.m., I'll show up and I'll just write. I think part of it was because I had a project I was working on. I was working on a novel and I wanted to get it to the end. And so I had something I was focused on. But then I feel like since that time that it was and that lasted for almost 2 years. But I've never been able to replicate since that time I've not been able to replicate that. And I'm like, Allah. But then I had to understand that there was a season for that. And this is a different season, and that's
Yeah.
okay. Even when
Mm.
I was doing my masters, I mean it was part-time and I was working part-time and I was caring for my dad. I had to still find time to write. But I had to just accept that writing every day it's not going to work. And so I just treat my writing as a date to myself and I try to make sure that I'm doing it. And one of the ways that I'll do it is I just sit down on a Sunday, look at my calendar and say what days can I actually genuinely show up to write, even if it's 30 minutes. And I'll just do that. Sometimes if I've like said I'm gonna write for like 3 days and I haven't written, I have to actually really ask myself. But again, I think it's just because there's a level of discomfort I have when I'm not writing, and that's enough to force me to write.
Mm.
So like when I'm having like my regular check-in session, maybe with a friend, and they ask me what's on your mind, so I feel like the only one thing I'll say is my writing. I'm not writing. I'm not writing. And if I say enough, then I'm gonna end up doing it. But I'm
Mm.
like very, very conscious about scheduling in time to write and about how some seasons are busier than others. And about how if want to write, I have to make sacrifices. I think one of
Mm.
my friends was actually saying that one of the things that helps him with his writing practice is he just creates seasons for things. So he knows that there's a season where he's going to be focusing on his writing, and there's a season where he's going to be focusing on another side project. And I'm actually trying to think about how to make that work for me now. So, like for context, it's a YA novel that I've written in 2016, and my agent, when my first agent back in 2022 tried to sell, but didn't have any luck, and then I got another agent last year who really believes in the story still, and I believe in it too. And I was supposed to write a new draft. It took a very long time. Alhamdulillah, I just sent the draft
Then-
at the end of this month, but it took a lot. It took a lot, like adjusting to working full time, to move into a new city. Like there was just I had a lot of responsibility, but I also desperately wanted to write.
Mm.
But oh, it was tough. It was tough, but I had to find the time. And I think a good chunk of finding that time was support, emotional support, prioritizing, being able to delegate, being okay with some things just falling to the side, to be honest. But
Yeah.
my philosophy with writing is just always as with anything that you care about, if it's something that you really care about, you have to show up for it.
Mm.
You
That's
just
very
have to show
wise.
up.
It's a really beautiful approach to it, subhanAllah, that practical thing of like, I will make time to write, and really carving it out and being very intentional about it while also recognizing and having that grace with yourself with regards to other life responsibilities and the kind of
That's
seasons
my
that come
second
and
biggest
go.
learning, sis. I'm very bad at giving myself grace, and I feel like that's one of the things Allah's taught me in this first half of this year. Just
Alhamdulillah.
grace, 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 because it's hard to have grace with
Mm.
yourself. I forgot the second half of your question, actually. Maybe
No,
I've
I think
answered
I
it.
think you answered it, yeah.
Okay.
Because like you
Okay.
said, the when is when you can, but also
Mm-hmm.
really prioritizing it, and the why is because it's important to you. And I
Yeah.
think we
Yeah.
sometimes overcomplicate it, when it is really that simple as if it is important to you and you care enough. Like you said, another thing you mentioned that I thought was interesting was, the support that you receive from people around
Mhm.
you. And that also means kind of stating that to other people, not only to yourself, that commitment that writing is something that is important to me. And in order to fulfill that, and I need your support with whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also quite interesting.
I was gonna say it took my parents a while to come around, but when I feel like they eventually did. Or I feel like my writing became serious when I got an agent. But anyway, since that time, my dad's always asking me, "How's the book? How's the book? How's the book?" It's always asking for updates, and that's, to be fair, even though it's not pressure, it's helpful because it's a reminder that there's something that I'm working on, and I think that's what you should do when you have something that you care about. Just tell like a few people that you love and that care about you and your goals, because they can check in with you. I have friends who randomly ask me, "How's your book coming along?" And I usually find that helpful because even if I haven't been writing in a long time, it make me think about, oh God, this book that I said I was gonna write. But yeah, like it is helpful, I would say, to have that.
Yeah, subhanallah. Jazakillah khairan, Saad, for your time and
Like,
for
yeah,
sharing your
key.
journey and your story with us. I've learned so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Suad is just such a bundle of wisdom, Allahumma barik. I really enjoyed that interview. There's so much I love about how she reflects on her journey and the positive and productive light she chooses to view things through. There's so much that I think many of us can relate to. Taking a different path in life, but still holding on to our passion for our craft, the personal value of writing as a means of making sense of the world and our place in it, and coming to understand writing as a way to serve Allah. A consistent pattern I've found in the lives of passionate people is that starting is the only way to open up the doors of possibility. Hearing how Saad's early drafts led to her building her confidence and how her investing in her skills led to her learning so much more about her craft and her abilities is something that I find is a really strong personal lesson for me. She had to consider herself a writer before she became one. It can feel like a sort of chicken and egg situation, but when Suad made the choice to tell her parents, family, and friends that she writes, their support was part of what allowed her to create the time to write and affirm writing as something that's important to her. Besides that, I love how her relationship with Allah is a core part of her journey, and how her desire to be published taught her a lot about her purpose here in this dunya, as well as tawakkul and tenacity. And her practices, such as her commitment letter and always reviewing and renewing her intentions, are definitely strong lessons that we can all take forward. My biggest takeaway personally was living to serve Allah and writing to serve Allah as a spin on the motto she was originally taught. And her beautiful reflection, the words that I really love the most that I think I'll be quoting for sure is, "Without Allah, you couldn't write a single word." Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Muslim Storytellers Podcast. We hope today's conversation sparked ideas, encouraged your creativity, and reminded you of the power of your words. Make sure to stay connected. Check out our website, muslimstorytellers.com, for services and resources, and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram to stay up to date with events and announcements. Speaking of announcements, we have a very exciting challenge for Muslim creators this November 2025, a writing challenge. That means 30 days of prompts, writing feedback, workshops from industry experts, and Q&A sessions. And there are prizes to be won and a chance to submit your November masterpiece to our anthology. All of this will be taking place on the Muslim Storytellers Discord server, so make sure to sign up at muslimstorytellers.com to get access. And if you're listening as a service provider, be it an illustrator, editor, printer, publisher, or any book industry professional, get in touch for the opportunity to partner with us and support our November challenge. Thank you so much once again for listening. We'll be back soon with more insights, inspiration, and honest talk about the writing life, inshallah. Until then, assalamu alaikum and more ink to your pen.